Well, welcome everyone. Glad to see the turnout this morning, and I think you are in for a real treat. And I want to set a little of the context and background before we get started. This really is a product of the University Connections initiative. This was an initiative that started a couple of years ago, and it was really to look at how Colorado State and the downtown area, the city, and the river area could really make some positive improvements. And there were a number of task forces, and the task forces, which were all from volunteers in the community, all people who are interested in really making this as positive and as grand a community as possible. And it was really a think tank, and out of that came things like the Fort Zed, the Net Zero Energy District, that is, continues to work today. Some of the initiatives about with the Poudre River, bicycling, and so on. Then University Connections said, let's reconvene and renew again, and so that's what we did in 2012, I believe it was. And so there were task forces that were formed, and another one was called the Infill and Redevelopment Task Force. And this is what is really related to what we're doing here today. That task force really focused on what we tagged as the Mason University District. And it was really about looking at this area of the Mason corridor, and really from Cherry to about Prospect, and then some area on either side. And how could we make that a vibrant, fulfilling, really grand area of the city? And so one of the action items that came out of our task force's work was to develop a living laboratory, and we called it the Urban Laboratory. And that was really to bring together people in the community, professionals, students, citizens, to really use that as kind of a think tank about what could we do for this area to really make it as vibrant an area as possible. And so the Urban Laboratory was born, and it had three components. One was to dream, and so again, to bring people together so we could really, have that possibility of what this could be. It was also to provide technical assistance, again, bringing some of the professionals together, and for people that had ideas about how to redevelop their property or develop, or what we do about the transportation in that corridor. And another one was advocacy, which was to build support to develop this area and redevelop it in as fine a way as it could be. So the Urban Lab Steering Committee began to operationalize this idea and this concept. And without belaboring it, one of the outgrowths of that, Dr. Jane Choi, who is the assistant professor of landscape architecture at CSU, is on the steering committee, and she had her graduate students develop a master plan for this area. And there were some from the steering committee that attended her class, and that where the students provided the presentation. And Matt Robinault from DDA was there, some other community folks, and they and us and I were blown away. These students have so much creativity, and there were so many good ideas that we wanted to share that. And so that's why we're here this morning, and why we've invited you to just listen to what they have put together and their ideas. And if there's a kernel of what can be taken away and really maybe operationalized or built or redeveloped, again, to reach our dream of what we think the Mason University District can be, then again, that's the purpose for being here this morning. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Choi and have her introduce her class and introduce the presentation this morning. So welcome, Dr. Jane Choi.
Stuff right there. Good morning, everyone. So I'm Jane Choi, and I'm an assistant professor in the landscape architecture program at CSU, and the instructor of the urban design studio in the graduate program. We are really extremely pleased to be here and to have the opportunity to share our work with you today. Being that our graduate program is really only just over 3 years old, we've been really looking for opportunities to try to engage with the city and with the wider Fort Collins community, and to really share the interesting work that's going on in our institution with you. The work that you're about to see is the culmination of a semester's worth of research and design that is focused on just the Mason University district. And due to the numerous shortcomings of conventional urban design practice, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, we decided to take a kind of a different spin this semester in this class, and we decided to collaborate with Brian Dunbar, who's over here, with the Institute for the Built Environment, and try to apply the lenses framework in our urban design strategy. If you're not familiar with lenses, it stands for living environments and natural, social, economic systems. And so this triple bottom line measure of sustainability was something that we tried to incorporate in our approach, which is a much more holistic strategy for designing sites. So what you'll see as part of the presentation is a chart which is really a metric that we developed in our studio as a way to try to measure the progress of the proposals that you'll be seeing based on the lenses guidelines. So that's something that the students will talk a little bit more about in the presentation. So I have 6 students. They will introduce themselves. They were split up into 2 teams and developed 2 different master plans with 6 individual seed projects. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to the students, and only ask that you kindly hold your questions till the end of the presentation. It should take about an hour, and there'll be an opportunity for Q&A at the end. Thank you.
Hi, and thanks to everyone for coming to see our ideas on this district. My name is Stephen Kansman, and I worked in the first group, the Building Links Master Plan, with Rita Manna and Jason Owen. So to outline our presentation for today, I want to discuss the key points of our talk. First, we'll give you a bit of information about the background, about the current statistics of the site and some of our site analysis. Then we will talk about the master plan strategies and an outline for outline our reasoning for the decisions which were made here. Then we will move into our individual seed projects and go into more detail about our ideas. So we are here today to present our findings on the Mason Street University corridor, from approximately Cherry Street in the north to Prospect Road in the south, and from Remington Street in the east to Meldrum in the west. We will be explaining our analysis of the social, natural, economic, and aesthetic aspects of the site and our areas of focus for proposals to make this corridor more active, vital, and regenerative for the future. The Mason University corridor has great potential as a strong connection between the shopping, dining, and pedestrian activity of Old Town Fort Collins in the north with the vitality and public green space of Colorado State University's main campus in the south. These are 2 of the most important activity centers of Fort Collins, and the corridor along Mason Street provides important opportunities for linking them. One of the most prominent existing site conditions is the BNSF railway that runs down Mason Street. The tracks run beside Mason on CSU's campus from Prospect to Laurel, and then shift in the north to a median in the center of Mason Street until curving off to the east just before Cherry Street at the north end of the site. The railway shifts from raised to lowered in relation to the street and represents a significant barrier for moving east-west across the corridor. Much of the recent change along the Mason corridor has been due to implementation of the city's new MAX bus rapid transit system. The MAX line is designed to provide timely, reliable public transportation along the Mason corridor from the downtown transit center at LaPorte Avenue to a new south transit center along Mason just south of Harmony Road. This bus rapid transit line is just one way that the Mason University corridor can become a multimodal connection between CSU and Old Town. Next, I'd like to talk about our vision statement for this project. The concept of building links provides recognition to places, cultures, and elements which are not currently present in the Mason University District. It attempts to prevent future suburban and urban sprawl here in Fort Collins. We have focused on increasing the density of the Mason corridor to activate the already centralized populated areas of the city. We have done this in a way that provides comfortable and active cultural spaces, reclaims our agricultural heritage, and provides safe and natural greenways for wildlife. Next, I'd like to turn it over to Jason Owen, who will be talking more about transit-oriented development.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jason. Talk a little bit about transit-oriented developments. So this basically is a dense mixed-use development that is centered around a public transportation system. So it's a dense mix of residential, retail, commercial, recreation. The idea is that people can, live and work and shop, recreate within close proximity, and have easy transportation or be within walking distance. So they don't have to rely on their personal automobiles. And this also helps to greatly reduce suburban sprawl. There's a big emphasis on wide pedestrian-friendly walkways with landscapes, planters, seating, lighting, things like that to make an attractive pedestrian environment, and this then attracts business and growth to the area. So this has been proven to create a higher quality and a more environmentally sustainable way of life than suburban living. So an example of where this has been done successfully is Euclid Corridor in Cleveland. This is a downtown area that was pretty run down. The city invested money to build it up. So they brought in attractive walkways, planters, landscaping, seating, and also an efficient bus transportation system, just to create a very attractive, successful place for people to use and experience the city. Because this is a historic city, the architect really worked to weave the new landscape elements with the existing historic fabric, and the result was a design that kind of unified the entire corridor, but still has individual identities along the way. This corridor also runs through Cleveland State University campus, so the campus actually reoriented their master plan to better orient to the streets. And to capitalize on the growth that was going to be taking place, they created a unified landscape along the corridor through campus. There's 2 bus stops on campus, which have become like focal points and entranceways into the university. And this project has been very successful. It's spurred lots of developments and growth for the city and for the campus as well. Another successful place is Portland Mall, also a downtown development corridor. I chose this project because, as you can see, they have a train running right down the center, much like we have on Mason Streets. So they just had a unique idea of using attractive, different colored paving materials to delineate the railroad, the streets, the walkways and intersections. This created a unified and attractive design elements, as well as also increased safety. Again, you can see the wide walkways, the landscaping made this a very attractive corridor, which was very successful in bringing developments and growth and revenue to the downtown area. And then Southwest Montgomery, the big idea for this is they wanted to treat all of their stormwater on site. So they created this green stormwater spine, as they called it, which is a series of bioswales which runs down the length of the entire corridor and also up and down the cross streets. So all the water runoff from the streets and the buildings runs into these planters where the water gets retained and can slowly soak in and be purified by the plants, soak into the soil. This helps reduce flood control, and also this has created an attractive and unifying landscape elements along the corridor as well. And I would now like to turn it over to Rita, who's going to give some more precedents.
Hi, I'm Rita Manna, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about permaculture. Permaculture is a landscape design concept that was designed in the 1970s by David Holgram and Bill Mollison. Together, they created a way to change how we humans interact with our landscapes, produce food, deal with our waste, and care for our planet. Their grassroots movement has spread to all corners of the earth and can be found in all climate zones, on every continent, and in every scale. An example of permaculture can be found in the form of a food forest. Now, food forests mimic all forest aspects that mimic the understory, the canopy, and the midstory, as well as its biodiversity. Only in this case, we're using only fruit-bearing or edible plants. They also place emphasis on utilizing vertical space rather than sprawling spaces. Now, when we talk about implementing permaculture into our city here, we have to think about how that's going to help us economically as well as aesthetically. So greenways are a huge economic boost to any city area. They create a unique sense of space. Shoppers feel more comfortable. They stay longer and spend more money. Shade cools. Trees provide shade which cool and buffer hot city streets. And they tend to attract new businesses and entrepreneurs. So here we've outlined the existing tree canopy. You will notice on the north end here above Mountain Avenue that there's a serious lack of tall tree canopy and vegetation. Also here, our map is oriented with the north end on the right end, the opportunities for growth for our city. The one-story buildings are outlined in the yellow, surface parking lots are in gray, and vacant lots are in the dark yellow. Also, we've outlined the events and performance venues here, and notice that there is a large concentration of events and venues in the north end in Old Town, but really that things kind of peter out and are not existent in the central and southern zones of our site. Okay, so now I'm going to go over our master plan. So here we've combined the natural and built environment that seamlessly coexists with the urban framework of our district. Our three elements, cultural, agricultural, and natural, are combined to make a successful urban environment for both people and other living organisms. Upon observation of the current conditions, we noted that there are three distinct zones within the Mason University corridor: the northern, the central, and the southern. The northern zone includes Old Town and is part of the historic beginnings of our city. The central zone has sparse infill with a lack of identifying character and amenities. The southern zone consists of the university campus, which emphasizes forward thinking. So in this area, in the northern zone, we see great potential for strong connections with the built and natural environment. In this area, we would like to see the implementation of urban agriculture in the form of food forests and community gardens. We see a revitalization of the historic trolley barn and creating a railway museum. We see the implementation of memorial parks to honor our founding individuals and cultures. And we would like to place emphasis on this area as a place for wildlife to connect to the Poudre River to the north. Here in the central zone, we would like to see the implementation of dense mixed-use development. This would provide an opportunity to create strong neighborhood ties, encourage entrepreneurs to provide centralized public recreation space, and to display public art. In the southern zone, the university has the opportunity to showcase their innovative research and technologies in captivating and engaging ways. This can be done through the implementation of a museum, demonstration spaces, hotels, and other amenities. To distinguish the different types of infill development found within the three zones, we would suggest a building of architectural styles. In the northern zone, future buildings would reflect the character of Old Town. In the south, we would suggest a more contemporary building style, which would reflect the innovative ideas of the university, while maintaining consistency in building materials and aspects of current university buildings. In the central zone, we would suggest a mixing of both contemporary and historic building styles. Now, this model outlines potential infill development for our master plan. Please note the concentration of infill in the centralized area. So here we've outlined the major ideas behind our master plan. On the top are areas of great cultural importance. The center diagram shows locations of potential urban agriculture, and the dark green diagram outlines the wildlife corridor running through our site. The bottom diagram shows how these three systems are interacting with one another. Here you can see that we have altered the existing roadway to better incorporate stormwater infiltration, pedestrian movement, and bicycle traffic. I would like to point out that we have not eliminated vehicular traffic, but rather have reduced the width of the road to discourage vehicular movement. Here we have a plan view of the potential intersection here in Mason Street. We focused on traffic calming measures to ensure pedestrian, vehicular, and bicycle traffic safety. To ensure that bicyclists were not plowing through intersections or speeding beside pedestrians, we have implemented these jogs to force the cyclist to slow down at each intersection. This map illustrates the focus projects, which we believe will help to jumpstart the revitalization of Mason Street. While we have put many detailed thoughts into areas of our master plans, these are the main areas which we felt were most important. So now that I've explained the basis behind our master plan, I've introduced 3 zones for development and have provided you with the suggestions for potential street organization. I'll begin to speak about how we can encourage the citizens to interact with our proposed new infill. So in order to make the best suggestions for enhancing the human element here on the corridor, we should take a look at the founding cultures and events of Fort Collins. The colors listed there on this timeline indicate significant events for specific ethnic groups. As you can see, there are many different cultures which contributed to the beginnings of Fort Collins. There were Native Americans, Japanese immigrants, Mexican Americans, African Americans, and European immigrants, which were among the first populations to inhabit this area. However, through the years, we have lost a great deal of our cultural diversity. And diversity is the difference in ideas, morals, cultures, lifestyles, and goals. It is important to us because it helps us to identify the difference between us and to embrace them. By having an eclectic mix of people, it ensures a dynamic and vibrant community. So in this slide, I've analyzed the location of existing centers of art and culture found within the Mason corridor. As you can see, there's a strong collection of places on the northern end with sparse locations further south, thus providing a spectacular opportunity to introduce more cultural spaces within the southern and central zones. So if we do have these opportunities for centralized development, what's going to draw in our diverse population? What's going to bring people to our space? Well, we need new retail options for various ethnic and socioeconomic backgrounds, diverse employment opportunities, ethnic markets, restaurants, and accessible recreation space, just to name a few. So what does the city need to do in order to fill the needs of its new potential citizens? They need to add a multi-story mixed-use development, widen sidewalks, add in parking structures, repurpose the alleyways, provide diversified transportation options. Here are the locations of the 3 seed projects that we believe will begin the revitalization of the Mason University corridor. We have the Mason Street Experience, the Oak Street Plaza Extension, and a centralized park between Olive and Magnolia. So here's how Mason Street appears today. Notice the pedestrian area and the existing building heights. And this is Mason Street after the improvements. We have repurposed the street parking in this area to be a delineated bike lane and water infiltration bioswale. We have widened the sidewalk, installed public seating, and created a rich sense of space. Now, we also have widened the sidewalk for an opportunity for stores, restaurants, bodegas, etc., to kind of spill out from the buildings and onto the sidewalks, further engaging our pedestrians and our bicyclists. Next, we have the Oak Street Plaza extension. Notice how the majority of the elements in the existing plaza have remained. We are now looking to incorporate a canopy of trees to create a larger, more integrated mingling place for our residents. The new plaza can be designed to pay homage to our founding cultures, and it can include both local and internationally created public art and sculptures. It can easily act as an extension to the lively pedestrian zone of Old Town Square. So here's a current view of Oak Street looking southwest, what it looks like now. And here's a potential look at the Oak Street Plaza after its implementation. Notice the open areas which can provide a space for outdoor cafes, markets, and vendors. There's also plenty of space for leisure and interpersonal interaction. We have also incorporated and revitalized the alleyway to be between the blocks to allow for additional public space. So in keeping with the notion of providing additional public space outside of the main thoroughfare of Mason Street, we would like to see the center areas between the buildings become active and engaging. These areas provide a place for recreation, sports, leisurely activities, and commerce. In this park, we have suggested the addition of an open lawn, volleyball courts, areas for food trucks, and a chain-free seating space. And here's a look at the plaza from the ground level. And in keeping with the historic foundings of our city, Jason will now discuss ways in which we can incorporate urban agriculture into the Mason University District.
Okay, so Fort Collins has a long history of agriculture in this area, from cattle and sheep ranching to wheat and sugar beets, and also apple and cherry orchards. So we felt it would be very fitting to kind of tie back into this agricultural history and relate this into our design for Mason Corridor by using urban agriculture, things like community gardens. To do this, there's many benefits to community gardens, social benefits, just people getting out, working together, getting their hands dirty, getting in touch with nature and food. And it's good for the city, can generate revenue, and better food security, things like that. So this map shows our locations for proposed gardens along the corridor. So starting at the north end, we have the food forest, and then working southward, we've got a children's garden, a large community garden, a garden for seniors. And then in the dense part of our development, there'll be a lot of restaurants, so we can have small gardens for the restaurants to grow their own food and herbs. And then south on CSU campus, a garden for students, and then at the far south end, a large research garden for CSU. I focused at the north end for 3 seed projects, which will be the food forest, the children's garden, and the community garden. The map on the right just shows how these 3 gardens connect with important places nearby, such as local schools, the Discovery Science Center, and the farmers market on Howe Streets. I created a series of diagrams just to kind of show what these 3 gardens would incorporate, the infrastructure that they would need to function, the types of crops and stuff that you could grow there. So this is for the community garden. It's meant to be a year-round place, so there can be productive food all 4 seasons. And the images just show, what this garden would be made of and how it would operate. The children's garden is meant to be a place for work, education, where the children can learn, where the food comes from, how to grow it. They can learn responsibility and work, and also a place of play and creativity, where they can have fun while they're learning and working. And the food forest, as Rita mentioned earlier, is a place of multiple stories of food production. You have the canopy with fruit and nut trees. Mid-story can be vines, grapes, things like that, berry bushes, shade-tolerant plants on the ground level. You can also raise animals, chickens, bees in this place, and it can also provide valuable wildlife habitats. This just shows some of the people and community organizations that would utilize these urban gardens that could benefit from them and help to work in them, maintain them, things like that. So this is a plan of what the community garden could potentially be. This would be a very attractive urban design garden that could be a community draw and focal point as well as for producing food. So, attractive paving, planters, raised planters, plazas, public space, shade trees for sitting in the shade, resting, things like that. There'll be a large building that can be for processing and storing food, and also for public events, parties, dinners, things like that. A greenhouse for raising plants in the wintertime. It could be a very attractive and productive place for the community. The site that we've chosen, this is what it looks like today, and this is a rendering of what that could potentially look like with the attractive paving and raised planters. It could be wheelchair accessible, and you can see the building in the background and the fruit trees. Moving on to the children's garden. Like I mentioned before, this could be a very fun, interactive place. You've got planters that are raised in fun shapes. There'll be a play area for the children, a climbing tower. They can go up and look out over the city and over the garden. Animals can be raised here. Just a place that can be fun for the children to to have fun and be creative while they're learning about farming and learning how to work and be responsible. This is a picture of what the site currently looks like, and a rendering of what that could be like once implemented. And then finally, the food forest. This is located at the north end, and like I mentioned before, this is multiple stories. So you've got paths at the ground level, so people can access the food at the ground level, and then you've got this really iconic canopy walk, which leads through the canopy, starting at the south end, working through the north end. This can be an attractive feature and can enable people to experience the forest at multiple levels, and also be able to harvest the food in the canopy as well. The canopy walk extends across Cherry Street and then connects at the north end to the Discovery Science Center. I'd now like to turn over to Stefan, who will talk about the wildlife habitats.
All right, so I looked at opportunities for not only this district to provide for people, but also possible opportunities to provide for wildlife. The Mason University District sort of works as this possible opportunity to connect existing wildlife corridors around Fort Collins, specifically the Poudre River corridor in the north with the Spring Creek corridor in the south. So first I looked at different types of wildlife that use the Fort Collins urban fabric and the sort of needs that would need to be provided to create habitat for these species, everything from insects through birds to small and larger animals up to foxes. I also made an inventory of the different types of vegetation and what benefits they provide for people as well as for wildlife for the implementation of habitat. And I sort of came up with this collection of spaces that can be strung together to create a continuous terrestrial wildlife corridor for movement through the Mason University District. On the bottom, the spaces are color-coded with their current land uses. And these, here's a close-up of the northern part of the site from Cherry down to Laurel. These different spaces have different strategies for turning them into wildlife habitat, everything from parking lots to already existing dedicated green spaces to the green areas around buildings. And I made a series of strategies for turning them from their current conditions to wildlife habitat, including when this corridor goes through more private spaces, working with the landowners to create incentives and different programs to increase the wildlife habitat and connect with the corridor. So this is a map sort of the feasibility based on those land uses. The darkest green areas are places that are already existing dedicated green spaces. And the lightest areas are some of those areas that would be hardest to include in the corridor, including more privately owned spaces. This is a map showing the main wildlife movement through the corridor from the existing wildlife corridors in the north and south. And the smaller arrows represent connections with this greenway through the canopy network that exists through the urban fabric. The upper map here shows in pink the main pedestrian movement through the corridor and how this interacts with the wildlife movement through the corridor as well as the street grid to show areas of possible conflict between pedestrians, traffic, and wildlife. On the bottom you can see one of the possible strategies of dealing with this is wildlife underpasses that allow animals to move across roadways without coming into conflict with traffic. Now these underpasses come in all shapes and sizes, everything from smaller culverts to larger underpasses that allow both pedestrian movement and wildlife movement. Another strategy for these areas is to provide adequate signage, letting people know that these are areas that wildlife can be moving through, working with slowing down speed limits and just making sure people know that this is an area where possibly wildlife could be seen. So the two seed projects I looked at were at the north and south ends of the site, where this greenway connects with the existing greenways, and also these are areas where the pedestrian movement and the wildlife movement come in close proximity. So these are particularly important areas to look at. At the northern end of the site, between Cherry and Maple Street along Howes, is a proposed area to connect from Lee Martinez Park and the wildlife habitat along the Poudre River down through the space using wildlife underpasses for the roads and also a lowered area for wildlife with high vegetation that makes them feel safer and while still allowing close pedestrian movement through the space as well. A section is cut through the underpass under Maple Street to show how it provides a continuous movement path for wildlife without coming into conflict with either the pedestrian walkways or vehicle traffic. Here's a possible look at what that sort of space could look like with the lowered area for wildlife movement and increased vegetation to create more habitat and make them feel safer moving through the site. So the other project is at the southern end of the site near Prospect Road, the busiest road in the area and therefore one of the most important places to create safe passage for wildlife as well as people, because I think a large underpass here could not only allow wildlife to connect down to the Spring Creek corridor in the south, but could create connections for the Mason Trail for biking and walking so that people don't have to deal with the traffic of Prospect Street. They can just go under the underpass and continue on. So here's a section showing sort of that change in elevation, the protected lower area for wildlife to feel especially safe when moving through the space, as well as allowing people to enjoy a natural space without creating conflicts between the two. So some of our conclusions for our master plan are that we want to make sure that we provide diverse cultural spaces for people to interact, to create opportunities for urban agriculture to tie to our roots and to bring people together in that way, and also to provide not only for people but for wildlife as well moving through this space. I think there's a lot of opportunities for these things. So this is the lenses diagram. It shows 4 different quadrants that we need to measure our success by: natural, social, economic, and aesthetic. We feel all these are important. And the different spokes on this wheel represent different aspects of the site. The rings going through the center show these different aspects: distribution, diversity, and vitality. So the dark dots represent our assessment of the existing conditions of the site, and the orange circles represent the improvements we feel we've made with our master plan strategy. As you can see, we've tried to focus and improve a lot on the natural quadrant, as well as bringing more aesthetic quality to the site and social through food and transportation and people through our different strategies to improve the site and create a better Mason University district. Thank you very much.
Next, I'm going to present our master plan, Mason Station, to you. My group consisted of myself, Erin Brown, Emily Harrison, and Evan Moore. And we're going to first discuss the vision for our master plan, give you an overview of the master plan, and then look at the urban analysis that went into this master plan, as well as the 7 different characteristics of our junctions. And then looking at 3 catalyst projects, our junction station catalyst project, water, as well as alleyways, and then provide a lenses evaluation for this master plan. So first, during our urban analysis, we created as a group a vision for this urban analysis. And what we wanted to take from it is building upon the existing successes within the Mason district, improving health functions of the natural systems, and also drawing people from throughout the community. So our vision for the Mason Station Master Plan consists of a line of inference that moves in a clear way. This line leads to insight and extends from historical concepts of Fort Collins, Colorado. 2 routes with 1 or 2 tracks each meet at a junction. A simple layout of tracks allow for the transfer from one route to another. A junction station is a place where transport operations occur. These junction stations create a datum of movement that movement pushing and pulling off a central axis. The junctions consist of varying schemes of circulation, density, and character. An increase in density and future development will ignite activity at each junction station, making Mason Street not only a transit route, but a destination for locals and visitors alike. So this is our first view of our master plan. What we're proposing is a squared plaza at each of the max stops. Those will be our Mason Station junctions. We are creating, keeping with this square scheme that refers to the western planning in these square city plans. The dark gray are our proposed infill development throughout the corridor, and each one of these junction stations, we're proposing a new plaza space on all four corners. This plaza space would be large enough for housing seating, for cafes, for small shops to flow out into the plaza space. It could house different art displays at different times of the year, as well as recreational facilities within those plazas. We're also proposing a bioswale that would run the length of Mason Street, creating a green spine as well as mitigating flood. And we're also proposing active alleyways that connect east to west to Mason Street and also activate in between the blocks. So first, looking at our analysis, we wanted to look at the existing parking conditions. We're proposing to remove the on-street parking that's currently on Mason Street. So we wanted to make sure that there was adequate surface parking as well as garage parking. And then this analysis looks at the existing street parking conditions, looking at an east-west connection to Mason Street. And then we wanted to look at the parcel owners within each of the junction stations. To the south, CSU is the main occupant of the junction stations, and to the north, it's mostly municipality-owned. So what this shows is that it would make it much easier to implement these junction station overlays at each intersection. Next, we wanted to look at where are the potential sites for development, infill, and density. So these included open parking spaces, empty lots, just any open area within the corridor that could be used for new development. And then we also looked at existing built environments that could be used in a different way. The red square towards the south end of the district, those are some facility buildings for CSU, which are going to be located off campus anyway, so this could be a great site for new development. Then we looked at the existing green spaces. Some are already dedicated green spaces, such as the oval, and some of these green lines are just green buffers along Mason. So here we wanted to look at where could these plazas be located? Where are the connections for these green canopies? And then this analysis is an overview of all three. During analysis, we saw that there was this hole in the central zone. So with this new development and infill, we can see a strong connection north to south. Next, we wanted to look at the social spaces, including the public seating along Mason. And during our analysis, we noticed there was actually literally only 3 seats on Mason Street itself for people to sit. We also looked at the lighting schemes throughout the Mason corridor, and there's quite a large variety of different light fixtures. So in our proposal with these identical intersections at each Mason station, they would have similar lighting, public seating would be adequate. We also did a walking analysis of the different materials along Mason Street, both vertical and horizontal hard surfaces, as well as the vegetation. And again, we see not a very strong connection because there's so much variety. So with these, an overlay of similar plaza spaces, every time someone gets off the Mason Street, they know that they're on Mason just based on the material use throughout the corridor. This analysis shows both the old and new and our proposed transportation. We're proposing to extend the trolley line along Mountain Avenue in the north. We're also proposing to extend the current Fort Collins bus system along Mulberry, so we have that strong connection to I-25. So during our analysis, this is the lenses evaluation of the current condition along Mason Street. We can see it's very lacking in the natural systems. It's also lacking in the distribution of economics. The social services along Mason Street are concentrated in the north and to the south, and so the community in the central zone is missing out on those opportunities. So even though we're overlaying a similar design plan at each junction station, we wanted to maintain the character of each intersection. In the north at Cherry Street, we're designating that our warehouse junction. This is a place where we're taking old buildings and creating new purposes for them. This is a site where people live and work. Next, moving down, we're at Mountain is our civic center. This is where a lot of municipality and county buildings are located. The corporate junction would be at Olive. This is where a lot of bank buildings are, commercial, service industry. And then at Mulberry is our Crossroads Junction. This is the junction that has the strongest connection to I-25 and our strongest connection east and west. And then the Laurel Student Life Junction is our place where it's our first connection to CSU's campus. This is a place where students can go to bars, bookstores, bike shops. And then the University Junction is our first connection, a main gateway to the academic spine on CSU's campus. And then the last junction at Prospect would be our Research Junction station, where we're proposing new dormitories, new research centers, convention centers, and possibly hotels as well. So we also did an analysis on the existing building height demographic throughout the corridor. And with our proposed new development, we wanted each junction to reflect the existing building height demographic. So we have our taller buildings down at Prospect as well as in the corporate junction, and then maintaining that old town feel both at Laurel and Mountain and up to Cherry. This is our proposed land use infill. In the CSU campus, we're proposing new student housing to accommodate the CSU 2020 plan and their projection of students that are going to be occupying that space. The warehouse junction, we're also proposing a grocery store that could be accessed from everyone along the Mason Street. And here is both our proposed and existing land use conditions. So you can see that there's a strong distribution of services, restaurants, commercial, multi-family, residential, as well as single-family residential throughout the corridor. So we see a strong connection, vitality, and distribution throughout the corridor. This is CSU's 2020 projection. They're projecting that they're going to need almost 500,000 square feet of new office space, almost 400,000 square feet of new housing, and we took this into account when we were proposing the new infill density. So the first catalyst project to kind of ignite this junction station idea would occur at the Crossroads Junction at Mulberry and Mason. So here we're proposing a hotel, parking garage with multi-use first floor, a skywalk to connect from that garage to the hotel, and build new multi-family housing as well as commercial, restaurant, retail, and service area. And this is what the ground floor would kind of look like. So we have a lot of public seating here, art installation, and here we can see that bioswale that will run along Mason Street and separate bike traffic with vehicular traffic, as well as separating the pedestrians from the bikes, so creating a really safe zone at each intersection. The other catalyst project would occur at the warehouse junction. Here we're proposing more multifamily housing, as I said before, the grocery store with parking above the grocery store, more museums. This is a place for families to reconnect, exercise and shop, and everything is right there at their back door. So next, Emily's going to talk about our water catalyst projects.
So part of our design for this project is to balance the goals of implementing a more robust stormwater system through the corridor and that of improving the pedestrian experience through this area. Together, these goals will combine to create greater economic development and greater stewardship of the environment. A large portion of the corridor is inundated with high waters during heavy rainfall events. We're proposing to increase permeability through this area with the integration of biofiltration swells and permeable paving along the corridor and alleyways. We often think of Colorado's precipitation falling in the form of snow. However, the greatest threat of flooding in Colorado is not snowmelt, but flash flooding from localized intense thunderstorms. These are events that take place over a short period of time, and these type of events are the focus of our stormwater proposals. Fort Collins has experienced a number of these floods over the years, most notably the flood of '97, when in July, 16 inches of rain fell over 2 nights. Estimated damages citywide were in excess of $200 million. Colorado State University campus suffered millions of dollars in damages to buildings and property, but has rebounded with an improved campus plan to prevent this magnitude of damage from occurring in the future. We have outlined a plan that will similarly fortify the city. Our aim is to capture water as it falls onto city streets, clean it, use it, and return the excess to the river. This first image is our stormwater master plan overlaid with the floodway through the city. This floodway identifies the places most at risk for flooding within our corridor and was used to determine where the swales and permeable paving located within alleyways and along city streets would be placed. Alleys that fall within the flood zone will incorporate improved stormwater infrastructure to capture excess runoff. These amended alleys stitch together various users along the corridor, improving the way people are carried onto and through the site. By bringing vegetation into these spaces, we're focusing on the experiential aspects of traveling through these spaces. To determine the location of amended alleys, we looked at where major streets intersected to reveal where the greatest volumes of people will be accessing our corridor, and thus where the greatest number of people will be served by them. In keeping with our aim to improve the pedestrian experience, we want our streetscape to take on a distinct character. This character is defined by a linear street profile, which will allow sheet flow of water from impermeable surfaces into 2 bioswales on either side of the street. In the circulation diagram, you will see we removed on-street parking along Mason Street to make room for the inclusion of bioswales and expanded sidewalks. Our bioswale strategy intercepts excess stormwater runoff during large storm events, alleviating the current storm drain infrastructure. The proposed bioswales and permeable paving through the flood zone will allow greater infiltration to occur, and plants and engineered soils included in our design will intercept heavy metals and biological toxins in contaminated stormwater. We'll move now to the north end of our corridor for a look at how the streetscape will actually appear. This is a perspective of our warehouse district, our northernmost station stop. The grayed out building to the left is an existing one, and the building to the right is a proposed multi-use building that will be placed on what is currently an empty lot. And this is how it'll look during a rain event. As you can see, the water will flow across impervious surfaces and into bioswales, allowing for the rate of flow to be slowed and infiltration to occur. This diagram shows a comprehensive view of how water will flow across the corridor. We'll move now to the middle section of our corridor for a look at another one of our seed projects. As part of our scheme, we're proposing a plaza that will celebrate water through a series of tiered channels. This diagram looks at primary and secondary uses adjacent to this proposed plaza, showing how the space will be activated by different users at different times of the day. This next diagram shows a connection between water flows and our site via the bioswales that line the streets. The water headed for the zone will be intercepted by these bioswales and directed towards our site. This plan diagram of our site shows again the blue and yellow indicating users that will be arriving at different times of the day, and blue arrows showing the flow of water. The site is designed for water to flow in sheets over the plaza area and into the bioswales. When the bioswales fill, water will then flow out through the allotted slots and into an open channel, which will then carry the water to additional swales located along the streets. One of our ideas for this plaza is to include solar panel shade structures, which will provide energy for the lights and the charging station on site. The ability to access free Wi-Fi and recharge laptops will draw users from nearby offices and restaurants during nice days. On stormy days, water will flow across the plaza area and into indicated bioswales that will fill up and then spill into an open channel, carrying the water into swales located on the street level. Next, I would like to introduce Evan Moore, who will be expanding on our alleyway concept and carrying you through some more.
Thanks, Emily. So as we've seen so far with our junction stations and with the improved streetscape and water improvement practices that Emily talked about, that Mason Street itself has a new identity, a new look, a new feel that we think will really benefit those passengers of the coming Max line as well as anyone else visiting Mason Street. So I'm going to be talking about some active alleys, some north, south, and east-west connections, taking people to and from these junction stations and these Max stops to other parts of the corridor. So we are aware that there was an alley plan done a couple years ago, and there have been some improvements to some of the alleys here in town. And so we wanted to survey some of the businesses that were adjacent to these alleys to see what they had to say about the improvements and what their customers were saying. There were lots of positive comments, lots of good things. Probably the top of the list was less smelly, so that's always a good thing to have in the city, as well as just the improved aesthetic of the alleyways. Some of the cons, so on Alley Cat Alley, the north-south access is cut off by some bollards, and for deliveries and things like that, that's kind of causing some problems for some business owners. Many said that there's not enough seating. People were just passing through, not stopping to take in the surroundings, and so some more public seating, maybe some public restrooms, definitely more vegetation. Everyone commented about how great the upkeep of the plants is and how more of that would be just great. And also, one of the major problems was that many of the businesses along these renovated alleys haven't done anything to improve their back of house. So you're walking on this nice alleyway, but everything still kind of doesn't look very good at people's back doors. And so those businesses that really want to take advantage of the alleyways, are kind of discouraged by what's happening on their block. So we took these into consideration through some of our strategies. So I wanted to show quickly what some other cities are doing. Cities in the U.S. as well as cities internationally are really taking advantage of this alleyway space, recognizing that it's not just a place for trash collection and for vagrants. It's a place that can be used by the general public. So to highlight two, Chicago they call them green alleys. They really focus on working to mitigate the flooding and working for the stormwater management. In Seattle, they have a really successful alley program. Lots of businesses have a second front door to those alleys, and there's lots of activity. So thinking about Fort Collins, what makes Fort Collins unique? There's lots to do. There's lots of social groups, there's lots of outdoor activities, there's lots of things to do and to see. Even on snowy, windy days like we're experiencing, I still see lots of people walking along College and through downtown, enjoying the different shops and bars and restaurants that the city has to offer. So thinking about some things that those alleyways could have. Some of them are not as wide, some of them there's a lot of space, and so trying to think outdoor recreation, more space for retail, places for not only adults but children as well. So we looked at all of the alleys in town, and as you can see, so again, north is to the right, so there's a lot of north-south movement on these alleyways, just separating the businesses on each side going north to south. These are the alleys that were renovated. As you can see, they're kind of spread out. They're probably set up in kind of some hot spot, good locations to start with and hopefully expand. But as of now, they're just many of the businesses that we surveyed said they're just kind of more beautified walkways. So we looked at all of the alleys, just did quick diagrams to see what was out there. And really for the alleyway itself, it's usually just an asphalt strip, not a lot going on, some trash collection, some deliveries, some occasional pedestrians. But really what we noticed is what's happening on the sides of the alleyways. The heights of the buildings, what's happening in those buildings. Lots of them are surrounded by big parking lots, or some are vegetated more than others. So really thinking about what's different about these alleys and taking those differences and trying to maximize those. So these are some proposed new alleys. So as you saw for the existing ones, lots moving north to south. Here we decided to make lots of east and west connections. So people getting off the Max line, enjoying the junction stations and Mason Street can move more easily east and west over to College, which is very popular, and to other areas of the district as well. And so based upon what's existing as well as our proposed infill and redevelopment, we felt that these would be good locations for alley expansion. So we looked at the land uses. We didn't think that all alleys were created equal or should be the same, and so we looked to see what was around them to try to tailor what the alleys can offer to the businesses, to the people that are surrounding them. And so here we've come up with 4 categories of alleys. Instead of just having some paving and some nicer lights and some more vegetation, we thought, well, what could be different? What could we do to improve these alleyways throughout the city? And so the first in blue are commercial alleys. So as they sound, they're surrounded by mostly commercial buildings. So you can see that strip in between College and Mason, lots of retail options, lots of east-west traffic, hopefully coming from Mason over to College. The purple are mixed-use alleys. So these alleys, as you can see, many of them are up north near the warehouse junction, where we propose lots of new development, and so we can make these alleys wider. If there's mixed-use residential or office space, retail, these alleyways would be busy morning, noon, and night. And so really trying to think about what those alleyways would need. Oops. So finally, in orange, we have the nightlife alleys. So these alleys can function similarly to the commercial alleys during the day, but when the sun goes down, they kind of take on a different look and characteristic and feel. They can have different lighting, different things that will draw people from the bars and restaurants out, and then hopefully back into other bars and restaurants, which will be good for business. And then finally, the utility alleys. So these alleys are typically less wide, good for trash collection, for people driving their cars to their garages, deliveries, things like that. Not really a place to stop and sit, but a place to move about. So real quickly, we'll go through just some quick ideas, a template of what some of these alleyways could look like. So utility, permeable paving, some bioswales to catch the water, to treat it as well. Very minimal lighting. We don't want to really intrude on the residents that might be along these alleys, but something to make it safe for pedestrians and cyclists to move about when the sun goes down. So mixed-use alley, again, these are probably wider, populated all throughout the day and into the evening. Again, permeable paving, a huge increase in vegetation was one of the things that we learned in our survey. So added vegetation, we didn't want to block off the alleyways and make them only for pedestrians, for deliveries and trash pickup and things like that. So making that accessible, as well as space for outdoor retail and dining. Commercial alleys, these alleyways would be, again, used really heavily during the week as well as on weekends. Lots of places to sit, increase in vegetation, aiding with the stormwater management, different paving to distinguish pedestrian routes and the vehicles. And then really most importantly in these alleys, space for businesses to overflow into the alleyway, have almost a second front door, and hopefully attract more customers. And finally, the nightlife alleys. And so again, very useful during the day, but at night, they can take on a different characteristic. The lighting can change. Businesses can bring out different furnishings to kind of give it a different feel and create a different atmosphere at night. And so the two catalyst projects I worked on was up in the warehouse junction by Mason and Cherry, and then a commercial alley down by Mason and Mountain. So as Aaron mentioned, we're talking about putting a grocery store up here in this junction. There's not a lot of places for grocery shopping here in the district, and so adding something like that would be a benefit, especially if we're proposing more residential buildings in this area. And so as you can see, there's a different color in the paving, kind of the red and the gray, to distinguish where the pedestrians go and where the vehicles go. Really giving the pedestrians the right of way. Again, these alleys will be busy all throughout the day and into the evening. So really providing a place where they can feel like they can walk safely and access the different businesses and offices from the interior. So one possible option, we've seen these in our research of different alleyways, that the front of a restaurant is typically on the street, but then having some outdoor patio space or a quick pickup window for coffee or a waffle in the morning would be great for people working or living in these areas. Another view, as you can see, we have the bioswales that Emily talked about that are on Mason Street coming into the alleys to create a cohesive feel all throughout the corridor. And again, for safety, dividing the pedestrians from the vehicles and bikes. And so the second project was a commercial alley, the block where Walrus Ice Cream is, if you know where that is. Again, different paving to distinguish who's supposed to be using those areas. This alley in particular has a lot of space on the interior, and so the good thing about a commercial alley, and many of the commercial alleys kind of have these same characteristics and sizes of interior space, is if you stand in the middle and do a 360, you can kind of get a feel for everything that block has to offer instead of walking the whole block. And so really making spaces for adults and for children to play, to interact, to shop, to dine. So something in these alleys, I've been on basketball teams with coworkers before, and we play against the other businesses nearby. So one of the things that we learned from the survey was that people aren't really kind of embracing the alleys or working together in the block to make them a success. And so something like this, a place where people can go on their lunch break, shoot hoops, to relax, to shop, to dine, would be beneficial. And then again, these larger spaces, playground for children, outdoor retail space, bringing the great things that Fort Collins has already done, like the Pianos About Town, into these spaces so that the entire University District is cohesive. And so the space this big, something that some other cities have done as well, is that they kind of have a cooperative of the buildings, the businesses, the people within these blocks. And so, on a certain weekend, they can, get a permit. All the restaurants can get together and say, we're going to have a taste of Fort Collins in this block. And they can kind of take over that alley. There's an art gallery. They can set up shop, for an evening or a weekend and have, outdoor art displays. And so, again, another thing to get businesses and people into these alleys and excited about them will help them make them more of a success. And so our lenses wheel, as Aaron mentioned, really deficient in the natural and places for improvement all across the board. And so what Aaron talked about with the junction stations really improves the aesthetic and the social aspects of the site. Emily with the improved streetscapes along Mason, really thinking about the stormwater management, definitely improves the natural and the aesthetic look of the University District. And then the alleyways, places where people can congregate, can socialize, and then hopefully another opportunity for businesses to maximize the space around them to improve the economic factors. And so with these three sets of seed projects and the overall master plan along Mason Street, we believe that riders of the future Max line, residents of Fort Collins, as well as people visiting for the first time, will really recognize where they're at once they enter Mason Station, and it can be a vibrant place where people can enjoy and thrive. Thank you. And I think we'll turn it back over to Lindsay for the questions. And we have the links for all the groups that were involved in this process. Lots of people have, besides just the 6 of us that have presented today, have put a lot of time and thought into this work. And again, we'd like to thank everyone for coming today.
Well, as you can see, there were a lot of wonderful ideas and a lot of creativity. Again, when we, from the steering committee, when we saw the presentation, we thought there are so many ideas that relate to the professional planners at the city, the engineers, and thinking of, the next iterations for city plan, thinking of the, when we're revising our standards and when we're thinking about new standards, land use regulations. This is all food for thought, as well as for the landscapers, the architects, the builders, the developers in the community. Because when we started with our task force, we thought, when we looked at the Mason University District, there is so much potential, and I think that the work that the students have done really illustrates a lot of wonderful ideas about what this area can be, can look like, can function as, and so on. So let's give the students another hand. Great work. So we've got a little time for some questions, and so open it up to questions from you all for the students and the work and the ideas that they have. I can't believe there's no questions from this group. Mark.
Good morning. First off, I'm just thrilled to death with your vision, and I hope that when I'm working for you in 5 years, you continue to have that kind of vision and bring it to bear with the city. One of the things that I thought kept coming back to throughout all of this was the displacement of parking. I share your vision for a different cross-section of Mason Street proper in this district area. But the problem keeps coming back in all the visions, whether it's through taking parking off of the street or using surface parking lots for repurposing and such. And so it comes back to the need. I mean, you can't just take it and then not offer businesses and residents another option there. So did you think, as part of your vision or your scenarios, in terms of strategic use of public-private parking or parking structures throughout your scenarios?
Thanks for your question. That's a really good point. And parking was definitely an issue that all of us tackled and really thought intensely about during this semester. And for at least, I can speak for my group when I say that all of our mixed-use buildings, we envision an incorporation of parking structures within those buildings. So Loveland, for example, does have a new urbanist development right downtown, and they do contain a parking structure within. And we feel that this would help to mitigate the additional off-site or on-site parking that we would be removing. And not only that, but we noticed that in all actuality, there wasn't too much parking along Mason Street. And by removing those, we figured that it would be okay to just mitigate it within the building structures themselves.
We actually added, I don't know if you saw it in the warehouse junction where there's a grocery store, there would be multi-story parking above that grocery store, and the same at Mulberry. And like Rita said, during the analysis, there was compared to all of the parking within the corridor, there's minimal street parking on Mason. And also through our analysis and proposals, we're including some parking may possibly occur in the alleyways. And then with the analysis of the connecting on-street parking that run east to west to Mason, there's adequate parking there and close to within the junctions.
As a geographer, I'm missing a map of population density in both of those master plans. I'd love to know who's living along there and who's not living along there. And I'm curious then to know who the people are using that corridor. You had a lot of pedestrians, a couple of bicycles. I'm interested in bicycle travel. And one comment that Rita made that struck me, I think it was Rita, showed the diagram forcing cyclists to slow down at intersections. I can get from my house north of Prospect to a meeting in Old Town in 10 minutes on my bicycle. I can do the same in my car, but then it takes me 5 or 6 minutes to find a place to park to get to that meeting. Why do you want to slow bicycles down? And the follow-up question to that is, what about the concept of vehicular cycling, and how does that fit into these two plans? Thank you.
Thank you. So regarding the population density, we have a map for that, but unfortunately with the limited time that we have here today, we included that in a book, which I'm not sure if Lindsay has it, or it will be provided for you. It's definitely up for public viewing, so we would encourage you to take a look at that. Also, in regards to the intersection with the jogs, what we were thinking was that a lot of times around Fort Collins, and myself, I am a major road biker. I bike everywhere. And one thing that I noticed in particular was that people just plow through intersections. They don't really care if there's a green light or a red light, or if there's a stop sign. They just kind of go for it. And because we wanted to really emphasize that Mason Street is for a more pedestrian-friendly and slower area, we want people to be kind of taking advantage of the amenities we're trying to provide for them. We would like to see the cyclists going a little bit slower because they are going to be in such close proximity to the pedestrians. Also, the jogs are created to prevent cyclists from plowing through those intersections. So we're looking to make it easier for both safer for both vehicles and cyclists. And in regards to the combination of vehicular traffic and bicycle traffic, we're just going on our general consensus, and all 6 of us have spoken about this, that our experience while cycling down Mason Street feels dangerous, it feels uncomfortable, and we all just really avoid Mason Street on our bikes. We prefer to go up and down Howes where there is a delineated bike lane. So we kind of figured, well, we want cyclists to be going through the space. We want them to feel comfortable to get off and go to these stores. So that's why we have separated the bike and the vehicles. Also, with the incorporation of bioswales that we all are suggesting, we feel that this would create a nice buffer between the cars, the buses, et cetera, to kind of provide some additional safety for the cyclists. Does that answer your question? Okay, thank you.
I'll go for it. So I'm a city planner, and you guys have so many different ideas, and I'm a little bit overwhelmed by all of them. In your minds, maybe each of you could answer if you have a moment, what would you prioritize? What would be your biggest idea that you think is the most important for this corridor?
Oh, no, that's a tough question. Improving the pedestrian areas, the walkways, the amenities for pedestrians, I think that kind of facilitates, that encourages the businesses to come. And I think that's kind of the starting point. And, you know, you've seen many different ideas for how that can be done. You know, the seating, the walkways, the bikeways, public arts. I think really focusing on the pedestrian areas is an important thing to kind of get all this going. I think everything else will follow once that happens.
Yeah, I'd kind of like to echo that. I think if you improve the pedestrian experience along Mason, and if you give it sort of more of a cohesive look along the whole district, I think that would really work as the catalyst to draw everything else in, and the growth and vitality that we'd look for.
I would agree, but as part of that, you know, we talked a lot about Mason Street itself and how important that is, especially with the Max line. If you're riding along and it's kind of ugly and disjointed, then you're probably just going to get off the bus and go over to college or go somewhere else. And so focusing on Mason's important, but then making those connections away from Mason not only gets people from the bus to somewhere else, but it also brings people to Mason. And so it's not just the Max riders, it's people parking in the other garages downtown, people parking along College or in other places, and getting them over to Mason Street as well.
I would agree. I think focusing on the streetscape is a really important aspect of this project, but I think there's also a lot of opportunity for infill development in the corridor, and so I think that would probably be my priority.
One analysis that I did through this process was looking at where the front entrances are of the buildings that sit on Mason. And it's an amazing amount that their entrances are towards Olive or towards Oak or Mountain, and very few have entrances towards Mason, especially our large, we did a study on the annual revenue of the businesses throughout the Mason corridor. So the larger businesses like the First National Bank, its main, even though its building sits directly on Mason, the main entrance is not on Mason. So looking at how to turn those businesses towards Mason to activate the areas when people are getting off the Max line so they know where they're going.
Well, you know, when it comes down to it, I think that incorporating both the cultural and natural elements are both very important. Here in Fort Collins, we really pride ourselves on being sustainable, green, and really in the forefront of this type of development. And I think that the incorporation of both are very important here. Also, you know, you can always build a plaza, you can build a space where you want to have people go, but unless they have a real reason to go there, they're not going to come to the space. So really emphasizing, you know, the cultural aspects, the fun, the just neat nature of our town, really playing up on that, I think, are the most important parts.
Okay, well, thank you. Jane, did you want to make a final comment? perhaps?
I just want to thank all of you again for coming to watch my students. I think the biggest lesson here was really the notion of trying to solve really sort of complex problems, but in a much more sort of holistic, hybrid fashion, so that when solutions for practical matters, such as traffic calming, is dealt with, that you're also considering this sort of the aesthetic benefits, that infrastructure could become something that gives an identity to the place as well. So all of those ideas were really sort of fueled by considering the lenses framework and Brian Dunbar's generosity in working with our students this past semester, and the opportunity to partner with Urban Lab. So it was really a wonderful experience, and we really appreciate you hearing this presentation.
Thank you so much.
I'm sorry, Diane, and I hate to excuse me, I hate to interrupt, but my name is Dave Edwards, and I serve as chair of University Connections. And I just want to express my excitement and my gratitude to the students and to the city and the city staff and the Urban Design Lab, because I can't think of a finer example of a connection between campus and community. And so the work you have done, I hope, has enriched your education. I compliment you for taking time off from your break, I think, to be here, because classes haven't started again. It makes me extremely proud and pleased that University Connections, which started 7 years ago, has resulted in an interaction and a connection both at the educational level, at the infrastructure level, to make this a better community for all. So thank you and congratulations.
Thank you, David. I was going to wrap up by saying that one of the real ideas and real, I think, power in University Connections is this ongoing catalyst nature. The work that people have done and continue to do in conjunction with University Connections is all volunteer. It's all for the love of the community and for generating ideas and for implementing ideas that really continue to make this just a wonderful community. I wanted to also acknowledge, and just by show of hands, the folks that worked on the Infill and Redevelopment Task Force, and also that are working on the Urban Lab Steering Committee. If you just wave your hands, and thank you for being here today very much. I think that also a huge thank you to Brian Dunbar and the Institute for the Built Environment. Brian had really stepped up after, the task force came up with the idea, and has provided space and has provided a lot of the impetus for this work that continues. So it does continue. I again applaud you and thank you for taking your time and sharing the ideas, and hopefully that has, planted seeds. Who knows where they're going to sprout, but planted seeds among all of you. And this has been taped, so it's a way also to share it with your friends. I think it will probably be up on the city's website, I hope, under the archives, and so you can go in and access it in that way. So again, thank you, grad students, very much, and Jane for doing this and for sharing. And so thanks again for coming and spending your snowy morning here. Thank you.